The Sneetches and Other Stories by Dr. Seuss. Read by Miranda Richardson. The Sneetches. Now, the star-belly Sneetches had bellies with stars. The plain-belly Sneetches had none upon theirs. Those stars weren't so big, they were really so small. You might think such a thing wouldn't matter at all. But because they had stars, all the star-belly Sneetches would brag,
"We're the best kind of Sneetch on the beaches."
With their snoots in the air, they would sniff and they'd snort,
"We'll have nothing to do with the plain-belly sort."
And whenever they met some, when they were out walking, they'd saunter straight past them without even talking. When the star-belly children went out to play ball, could a plain belly get in the game? Not at all. You only could play if your bellies had stars, and the plain belly children had none upon theirs. When the star-belly Sneetches had frankfurter roasts, or picnics, or parties, or marshmallow toasts, they never invited the plain belly Sneetches. They left them out cold, in the dark of the beaches. They kept them away, never let them come near, and that's how they treated them year after year. Then one day, it seems, while the plain-belly Sneetches were moping and doping alone on the beaches, just sitting there wishing their bellies had stars, a stranger zipped up in the strangest of cars. "My friends," he announced in a voice clear and keen, "my name is Sylvester McMonkey McBean. And I've heard of your troubles, I've heard you're unhappy, but I can fix that, I'm the fix-it-up chappie. I've come here to help you, I have what you need, and my prices are low, and I work at great speed, and my work is 100% guaranteed." Then quickly, Sylvester McMonkey McBean put together a very peculiar machine. And he said, "You want stars like a star-belly Sneetch? My friends, you can have them for $3 each. Just pay me your money and hop right aboard." So they clambered inside. Then the big machine roared, and it clonked, and it bonked, and it jerked, and it barked, and it bopped them about, but the thing really worked. When the plain-belly Sneetches popped out, they had stars. They actually did. They had stars upon theirs. Then they yelled at the ones who had stars at the start,
"We're exactly like you! You can't tell us apart! We're all just the same now, you snooty old smarties! And now we can go to your frankfurter parties!"
"Good grief," groaned the ones who had stars at the first.
"We're still the best Sneetches and they're the worst. But now how in the world will we know?" They all frowned. "If which kind is what, or the other way round?"
Then up came McBean with a very sly wink, and he said, "Things are not quite as bad as you think. So you don't know who's who. That is perfectly true. But come with me, friends. You know what I'll do? I'll make you again the best Sneetches on beaches, and all it would cost you is $10 eaches." "Belly stars are no longer in style," said McBean. "What you need is a trip through my star-off machine. This wondrous contraption will take off your stars, so you won't look like Sneetches who have them on theirs." And that handy machine, working very precisely, removed all the stars from their tummies quite nicely. Then, with snoots in the air, they paraded about, and they opened their beaks, and they let out a shout.
We know who is who! Now there isn't a doubt! The best kind of Sneetches are Sneetches without!
Then, of course, those with stars all got frightfully mad. To be wearing a star now was frightfully bad. Then, of course, old Sylvester McMonkey McBean invited them into his star-off machine. Then, of course, from then on, as you probably guessed, things really got into a horrible mess. All the rest of that day on those wild, screaming beaches, the fix-it-up chappie kept fixing up Sneetches. Off again, on again, in again, out again. Through the machines they raced round and about again, changing their stars every minute or two. They kept paying money, they kept running through, until neither the plane nor the star bellies knew whether this one was that one, or that one was this one, or which one was what one, or what one was who. Then, when every last cent of their money was spent, the fix-it-up chappie packed up and he went. And he laughed as he drove in his car up the beach. They never will learn, no, you can't teach a Sneetch. But McBean was quite wrong. I'm quite happy to say that the Sneetches got really quite smart on that day. The day they decided that Sneetches are Sneetches, and no kind of Sneetch is the best on the beaches. That day, all the Sneetches forgot about stars, and whether they had one or not upon theirs. The Zacks. One day, making tracks in the prairie of Prax, came a north-going Zacks and a south-going Zacks. And it happened that both of them came to a place where they bumped. There they stood, foot to foot, face to face. "Look here now," the north-going Zack said. "I say, you are blocking my path. You are right in my way. I'm a north-going Zacks, and I always go north. Get out of my way now, and let me go forth." "Who's in whose way?" snapped the south-going Zacks. "I always go south, making south-going tracks, so you're in my way. And I ask you to move and let me go south in my south-going groove." Then the north-going Zacks puffed his chest up with pride. "I never," he said, "take a step to one side, and I'll prove to you all that I won't change my ways if I have to keep standing here 59 days. "And I'll prove to you," yelled the south-going Zacks, "that I can stand here in the prairie of Prax for 59 years. For I live by a rule that I learned as a boy back in south-going school. Never budge. That's my rule. Never budge in the least. Not an inch to the west. Not an inch to the east. I'll stay here not budging. I can and I will. If it makes you and me and the whole world stand still." Well, of course the world didn't stand still. The world grew. In a couple of years, the new highway came through. And they built it right over those two stubborn Zacks and left them there, standing unbudged in their tracks.
Hello, my name is Dave. I'm Dave. I'm Dave too. I'm Dave. I'm Dave. And me. And me. And me. You. And me too. And me. And me. And me. And me. And I'm called Dave. Also, I'm Dave. And me. My name is Dave. I'm Dave too. Hello. And me. I'm Dave too. I'm Dave. Hello, I'm Dave.
Too many Daves. Did I ever tell you that Mrs. McCabe had 23 sons and she named them all Dave? Well, she did. And that wasn't a smart thing to do. You see, when she wants one and calls out, "Yoo-hoo! Come into the house, Dave!" she doesn't get one. All 23 days of hers come on the run. This makes things quite difficult at the McCaves, as you can imagine, with so many Daves. And often she wishes that when they were born, she had named one of them Bodkin Van Horn, and one of them Hoosfus, and one of them Schnim, and one of them Hotshot, and one Sonny Jim, and one of them Shadrach, and one of them Blinky, and one of them Stuffy, and one of them Stinky, another one Putt Putt, another one Moonface, another one Marvin O'Gravel Balloonface. And one of them Ziggy, and one Soggy Muff, one Buffalo Bill, and one Biffalo Buff, and one of them Sneepy, and one Weepy Weed, and one Paris Garters, and one Harris Tweed. And one of them Sir Michael Carmichael Zut, and one of them Oliver Bolivar Butt, and one of them Zanzibar Buck McFate. But she didn't do it. And now it's too late. What was I scared of? Well, I was walking in the night and I saw nothing scary. For I have never been afraid of anything. Not very. Then I was deep within the woods when suddenly I spied them. I saw a pair of pale green pants with nobody inside them. I wasn't scared, but yet I stopped. What could those pants be there for? What could a pair of pants at night be standing in the air for? And then they moved. Those empty pants. They kind of started jumping. And then my heart, I must admit, it kind of started thumping. So I got out. I got out fast as I could go, sir. I wasn't scared, but pants like that I did not care for, no, sir. After that, a week went by. Then one dark night in Greenwich, I had to do an errand there and fetch some Greenwich spinach. Well, I had fetched the spinach. I was starting back through town when those pants raced round the corner and they almost knocked me down. I lost my Greenwich spinach, but I didn't even care. I ran for home, believe me, I had really had a scare. Now, bicycles were never made for pale green pants to ride 'em, especially spooky pale green pants with nobody inside 'em. And the next night, I was fishing for doubt trout on Rover River when those pants came roaring toward me. Well, I began to shiver. And by now, I was so frightened that, I'll tell you, but I hate to, I screamed and rode away and lost my hook and line and bait too. I ran and found a brickle bush. I hid myself away. I got brickles in my britches, but I stayed there anyway. I stayed all night, the next night too. I'd be there still, no doubt, but I had to do an errand. So the next night, I went out. I had to do an errand, had to pick a peck of snide in a dark and gloomy snide field that was almost 9 miles wide. I said, I do not fear those pants with nobody inside them. I said and said and said those words. I said them, but I lied them. Then I reached inside a snide bush. And the next thing that I knew, I felt my hand touch someone, and I'll bet that you know who. And there I was, caught in the snide, and in that dreadful place, those spooky, empty pants and I were standing face to face. I yelled for help, I screamed, I shrieked, I howled, I yelled, I cried, oh, save me from these pale green pants with nobody inside. But then a strange thing happened. Why, those pants began to cry. Those pants began to tremble. They were just as scared as I. I never heard such whimpering, and I began to see that I was just as strange to them as they were strange to me. I put my arm around their waists and sat right down beside them. I calmed them down, poor empty pants with nobody inside them. And now we meet quite often, those empty pants and I. And we never shake or tremble. We both smile and we say, hi! Scrambled Egg Super by Dr. Seuss. Read by Miranda Richardson. I don't like to brag, and I don't like to boast, said Peter T. Hooper. But speaking of toast, and speaking of kitchens and ketchup and cake, and kettles and stoves and the stuff people bake, well, I don't like to brag, but I'm telling you, Liz, that speaking of cooks, I'm the best that there is. Why, only last Tuesday when Mother was out, I really cooked something worth talking about. You see, I was sitting here, resting my legs, and I happened to pick up a couple of eggs, and I sort of got thinking, it's sort of a shame the scrambled eggs always taste always the same. And that's because ever since goodness knows when, they've always been made from the eggs of a hen. Just a plain common hen. What a dumb thing to use with all of the other fine eggs you could choose. And so I decided that just for a change, I'd scramble a new kind of egg on the range. Some fine, fancy eggs that no other cook cooks, like the eggs of the ruffle-necked salamagooks. A salamagookses! Say, they should be good. So I went out and found some as quick as I could. And while I was lugging them back to the house, I happened to notice a tizzle-top grouse in a tree down the street, and I knew from her looks that her egg and the egg of the salamagooks ought to mix mighty well, ought to taste simply super when scrambled together by Peter T. Hooper. So I took those eggs home and I frizzled them up and I added some sugar, 2/3 of a cup, and a small pinch of pepper and also a pound of horseradish sauce that was sitting around and also some nuts. Then I tasted the stuff and it tasted quite fine, but not quite fine enough. To make the best scramble that's ever been made, a cook has to hook the best eggs ever laid. So I drove to the country, quite rather far out, and I studied the birds that were flitting about. I looked with great care at a mock-noodled finch. I looked at a beagle-beaked bald-headed grinch. And also I looked at a shade-roosting quail who was roosting right under a lassalax tail. And I looked at a spritz and a flannel-winged jay. But I just didn't stop. I kept right on my way, because they didn't have eggs. They weren't laying that day. Then suddenly, boy, up that hill a short space, birds! They were laying all over the place. Great, happy, gay families with uncles and cousins, all laying fine, strictly fresh eggs by the dozens. Why, I'd have a scramble more super than super. Scrambled egg super de-duper de-booper, special deluxe a la Peter T. Hooper. I picked out the eggs in a most careful way. I only picked those that I knew were grade A. I only took eggs from the very best fowls. So I didn't take eggs from the twiddler owls. Because I knew that the eggs of those fellows who twiddle taste sort of like dust from inside a bass fiddle. I went for the kind that were mellow and sweet. And the world's sweetest eggs are the eggs of the queet, which is due to those very sweet trout which they eat. And those trout, well, they're sweet because they only eat wogs. And wogs, after all, are the world's sweetest frogs.
Ribbit, ribbit, ribbit.
And the reason they're sweet is, whenever they lunch, it's always the world's sweetest bees that they munch. And the reason no bees can be sweeter than these
they only eat blossoms of hazelnut trees. And these hazelnut blossoms are sweeter than sweet, and that's why I nabbed several eggs from the queen. But I passed up the eggs of a bird called a strudel, who's sort of a stork but with fur like a poodle, for they say that the eggs of this kind of stork are gooey like glue and they stick to your fork. And the yolks of these eggs, I am told, taste like fleece, while the whites taste like very old bicycle grease. The places I hiked to, the roads that I rambled to find the best eggs that have ever been scrambled. I hunted new birds along wild tangled trails, through gullies and gulches, down dingles and dales. I wriggled my way and I crawled at a creep through a forest of ferns that was 40 miles deep. And I mushed through the brush till I found a fine quigger whose eggs are as big as a pinhead, no bigger. Then I went for the eggs of a long-legged quong. Now this quong, well, she's built just a little bit wrong, for her legs are so terribly, terribly long that she has to lay eggs 20 feet in the air, and they drop with a plop to the ground from up there. So unless you can catch them before the eggs crash, you haven't got eggs, you've got long-legged hash. Eggs! I'd collected 302, but I needed still more, and I suddenly knew that the job was too big for one fellow to do. So I telegraphed north to some friends near Fazol, which is 10 miles or so just beyond the North Pole, and they all of them jumped in their catamassai, which is sort of a boat made of sea leopard's hide, which they sailed out to sea to go looking for grice, which is sort of a bird which lays eggs on the ice, which they grabbed with a tool which is known as a squitch, because those eggs are too cold to be touched without which. And while I was sending those eggs, I got word of a bird that does something that's almost unheard of. It's hard to believe, but this bird called the pelf lays eggs that are 3 times as big as herself. How that pelf ever learned such a difficult trick, I never found out. But I found that egg quick, and I managed to get it down out of the nest and home to the kitchen along with the rest. But I didn't stop then, because I knew of some ducks by the name of the single-file Zumsian Zucks, who stroll single file through the mountains of Zums, quite oddly enough, with their eggs on their thumbs. And some fellows in Zums whom I happened to know just happened to capture 1,000 or so, and they wrapped up their eggs and they mailed them by air, marked special delivery, handled with care. I needed more helpers, and so for assistance I called up a fellow named Ali, long distance. And Ali, as soon as he hung up the phone, picked up a small basket and started alone to climb the steep crags and the jags of Mount Struku to fetch me the egg of a Mount Struku cuckoo. Now these Mount Struku cuckoos are rather small gals, but these Mount Struku cuckoos have lots of big pals. They dived from the skies with wild cackling shrieks, and they jabbed at his legs, and they stabbed at his cheeks with their yammering, clamouring, hammering beaks. Ali, brave Ali, he fought his way through, and he sent me that egg as I knew he would do, for my scrambled egg super-de-duper-de-booper special deluxe a la Peter T. Hooper. In the meanwhile, of course, I was keeping real busy collecting the eggs of the 3-eyelashed tizzy. They're quite hard to reach, so I rode on the top of a hammocker schnimmicke schnammicke schnopp. Then I found a great flock of southwest-facing cranes, and I guess they've got something that's wrong with their brains. For this kind of a crane, when she's guarding her nest, will always stand facing precisely southwest. So to get at those eggs wasn't hard in the least. I came from behind, from precisely northeast. And I captured the egg of a grickly gractus, who lays them up high in a prickly cactus. Then I went for some ziffs. They're exactly like zuffs, but the ziffs live on cliffs and the zuffs live on bluffs. And seeing how bluffs are exactly like cliffs, it's mighty hard telling the zuffs from the ziffs. But I know that the egg that I got from the bluffs, if it wasn't a ziffs from the cliffs, was a zuffs. Now I needed the egg of a moth-watching sneth, who's a bird who's so big, she scares people to death. And this awful big bird, well, the reason they name her the moth-watching sneth is because that's how they tame her. She likes watching moths, sort of quiets her mind. And while she is watching, you sneak up behind and you yank out her egg. So I got one, of course, with the help of some friends and a very fast horse. If you want to get eggs you can't buy at a store, you have to do things never thought of before. Why? To get at the egg of one very small dove, we had to pry all of one mountain top off. Then I heard of some birds who lay eggs, if you please, that taste like the air in the holes in Swiss cheese. And they live in big Zanzibar trees. So I ordered a trayful. The job was immense. But I needed those eggs and said, hang the expense. I still needed one more, and I saved it for last. The egg of the frightful, bombastic aghast. And that bird is so mean, and that bird is so fast, that I had to escape on a Gillica Jast, a fleet-footed beast who can run like a deer but looks sort of different. You steer him by ear. All through with the searching, all through with the looking. I had all I needed. And now for the cooking. I rushed to the kitchen, the place where I'd stacked 'em. I rolled up my sleeves, I unpacked 'em and cracked 'em, and shucked 'em and chucked 'em in 99 pans. Then I mixed in some beans. I used 55 cans. Then I mixed in some ginger, 9 prunes and 3 figs, and parsley. Quite sparsely, just 22 sprigs. Then I added 6 cinnamon sticks and a clove, and my scramble was ready to go on the stove. And you know how they tasted? They tasted just like... Well, they tasted exactly just like scrambled eggs super de duper de booper special deluxe a la Peter T. Hooper. Oh, Say, Can You Say? By Dr. Seuss. Read by Miranda Richardson. Oh, Say, Can You Say? Said a book-reading parrot named Hui. The words in this book are all phooey. When you say them, your lips will make slips and backflips, and your tongue may end up in St. Louis. Fresh, fresher, freshest. Do you like fresh fish? It's just fine at Finney's Diner. Finney also has some fresher fish that's fresher and much finer. But his best fish is his freshest fish, and Finney says with pride, the finest fish at Finney's is my freshest fish, French fried.
So, don't order the fresh or the fresher fish. At Finny's, if you're wise, you'll say, "Fetch me the finest French fried, freshest fish that Finny fries." Din's shin. We have a dinosaur named Din. Din's thin. Din doesn't have much skin, and the bones fall out of his left front shin. Then we have to call in Pinner Blin, who comes with his handy shin pin bin. And with a thin Blin shin bone pin, Blin pins Din's shin bones right back in. Bedspreader, bread spreader. Bed spreaders spread spreads on beds. Bread spreaders spread butters on breads. And that bed spreader better watch out how he's spreading, or that bread spreader's sure going to butter his bedding. 8 cakes, great cakes. As he gobbled the cakes on his plate, the greedy ape said as he ate, "The greener green grapes are, the keener keen apes are, to gobble green grape cakes, they're great!"
Are you having trouble saying this stuff? It's really quite easy for me. I just look in my mirror and see what I say, and then I just say what I see.
Now let's talk about money.
You should leave your grox home when you travel by air. If you take him along, they charge double the fare. And your grox must be packed and locked up in a grox box, which costs much, much more than a little old fox box. So it's heaps a lot cheaper to fly with your foxes than waste all that money on boxes for groxes. And what do you think costs more? A simple thimble or a single shingle? A simple thimble could cost less than a single shingle would, I guess.
So I think that the single shingle should cost more than the simple thimble would. Eat at Skipper Zips. If you like to eat potato chips and chew pork chops on Clipper ships, I suggest that you chew a few chips and a chop at Skipper Zips Clipper Ship Chip Chop Shop.
And if your tongue is getting queasy, don't give up. The next one's easy.
The Fudnuddlers. There are so many things that you really should know, and that's why I'm bothering telling you so. You should know the first names of the Fudnuddler brothers, who like to pile each on the heads of the others. If you start at the top, there are Bipper and Bud, and Skipper and Jipper and Geoffrey and Judd, Horatio, Horace and Hendrix and Hud, and then come Dinwoody and Dinty and Dud, also Fitzsimon and Frederick and Fudd, and Slinky and Stinky and Stuart and Stud. And down at the bottom is poor little Lud. But if Lud ever sneezes, his name will be Mud. Quack, quack. We have 2 ducks, one blue, one black. And when our blue duck goes quack, quack, our black duck quickly quack, quacks back. The quack's blue quacks makes her quite a quacker. But black is a quicker quacker-backer. Speaking of quacks reminds me of cracks and stacks and sacks and shacks and snacks. So,
Oh, say, can you say I have cracks in my shack? I have smoke in my stack, and I think there's a snack in the sack of my back.
West Beast, East Beast. Upon an island hard to reach, the East Beast sits upon his beach. Upon the West Beach sits the West Beast. Each beach beast thinks he's the best beast. Which beast is best? Well, I thought at first that the East was best and the West was worst. Then I looked again from the West to the East. And I liked the beast on the East Beach least. Pete pats pigs. Pete Briggs pats pigs. Briggs pats pink pigs. Briggs pats big pigs. Don't ask me why, it doesn't matter. Pete Briggs is a pink pig, big pig patter. Pete Briggs pats his big pig pigs all day. Don't ask me why, I cannot say. Then Pete puts his patted pigs away in his Pete Briggs pink pigs, big pigs, pig pen. Fred's food, Fred food. Fritz needs Fred, and Fred needs Fritz. Fritz feeds Fred, and Fred feeds Fritz. Fred feeds Fritz with Fritzy Fred food. Fritz feeds Fred with Fritzy Fritz food. And Fritz, when fed, has often said, I'm a Fred-fed Fritz. Fred's a Fritz-fed Fred. How to tell a klotz from a glotz. Well, the glotz, you will notice, has lots of black spots. The klotz is quite different, with lots of black dots. But the big problem is that the spots on a glotz are about the same size as the dots on a klotz, so you first have to spot who the one with the dots is. Then it's easy to tell who the klotz or the glotz is. What would you rather be when you grow up? A cop in a cop's cap, or a cupcake cook in a cupcake cook's cap? Or a fat flapjack flapper in a flat flapjack cap? Or, if you think you don't like cop's caps, flapjack flappers, or cupcake cook's caps, maybe you're one of those choosy chaps who likes cookie captain's caps, perhaps. More about Blynn. Well, when Blynn comes home tired from his work-pinning shins, the happiest hour of old Blynn's day begins. Mr. Blynn is the father of musical twins, who, tucking twin instruments under twin chins, lull their daddy to sleep with twin Blynn violins. And oh, say, can you say, far away in Berlin, a musical urchin named Gretchen von Schwinn has a blue-footed, true-footed, trick-fingered, slick-fingered, six-fingered, six-string, tin-schwinn mandolin. Rope soap, hoop soap. If you hope to wash soup off a rope, simply scrub it with scrope. Scrope is so strong that no rope is too long. But if you should wish to wash soup off a hoop, I suggest that it's best to let your whole silly souped-up hoop soak in Soapy Cooper's Super Soup Off Hoops Soak Suds. Merry Christmas Mush. One year we had a Christmas brunch with Merry Christmas mush to munch. But I don't think you'd care for such. We didn't like to munch mush much. And speaking of Christmas, here are some great gifts to give to your daddy. If your daddy's name is Jim, and if Jim swims, and if Jim's slim, the perfect Christmas gift for him is a set of Slim Jim swim fins. But if your daddy's name is Dwight, and he likes to look at birds at night, the gift for Dwight that might be right is a bright Dwight bird flight night sight light.
but never give your daddy a walrus. A walrus with whiskers is not a good pet, and a walrus which whispers is worth even yet. When a walrus lisps whispers through tough, rough, wet whiskers, your poor daddy's ear will get blispers and bliskers.
And that's almost enough of such stuff for one day. One more and you're finished. Oh, say, can you say... The storm starts when the drops start dropping. When the drops stop dropping, and the storm starts stopping. Horton Hatches the Egg by Dr. Seuss. Read by Miranda Richardson. Sighed Maisie, a lazy bird hatching an egg.
I'm tired and I'm bored and I've kinks in my leg from just sitting here day after day. It's work. How I hate it. I'd much rather play. I'd take a vacation, fly off for a rest, if I could find someone to stay on my nest. If I could find someone, I'd fly away, free.
Then Horton, the elephant, passed by her tree.
Hello,
called the lazy bird, smiling her best.
You've nothing to do, and I do need a rest. Would you like to sit on the egg in my nest?
The elephant laughed. Why, of all silly things, I haven't feathers and I haven't wings. Me? On your egg? Why, that doesn't make sense. Your egg is so small, Mom, and I'm so immense.
Tut, tut, answered Maisie. I know you're not small, but I'm sure you can do it. No trouble at all. Just sit on it softly. You're gentle and kind. Come, be a good fellow. I know you won't mind.
I can't, said the elephant.
Please,
Begged the bird.
I won't be gone long, sir. I give you my word. I'll hurry right back. Why, I'll never be missed.
Very well, said the elephant, since you insist. You want a vacation? Go fly off and take it. I'll sit on your egg and I'll try not to break it. I'll stay and be faithful. I mean what I say. Toodaloo, sang out Maisie and fluttered away. The first thing to do, murmured Horton. Let's see. The first thing to do is to prop up this tree and make it much stronger. That has to be done before I get on it. I must weigh a ton. Then carefully, tenderly, gently, he crept up the trunk to the nest where the little egg slept. Then Horton the elephant smiled. Now that's that. And he sat, and he sat, and he sat, and he sat. And he sat all that day, and he kept the egg warm. And he sat all that night through a terrible storm. It poured, and it lightened, it thundered, it rumbled. This isn't much fun, the poor elephant grumbled. I wish she'd come back, 'cause I'm cold and I'm wet. I hope that Maisie bird doesn't forget. But Maisie, by this time, was far beyond reach, enjoying the sunshine way off in Palm Beach and having such fun, such a wonderful rest, decided she'd never go back to her nest. So Horton kept sitting there day after day, and soon it was autumn. The leaves blew away. And then came the winter, the snow and the sleet, and icicles hung from his trunk and his feet. But Horton kept sitting and said with a sneeze, I'll stay on this egg and I won't let it freeze. I meant what I said and I said what I meant. An elephant's faithful 100%. So poor Horton sat there the whole winter through. And then came the springtime, with troubles anew. His friends gathered round and they shouted with glee. Look! Horton the elephant's up in a tree! They taunted, they teased him, they yelled, How absurd! Old Horton the elephant thinks he's a bird! They laughed and they laughed, then they all ran away. And Horton was lonely. He wanted to play. But he sat on the egg and continued to say, I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. An elephant's faithful 100%. No matter what happens, this egg must be tended. But poor Horton's troubles were far, far from ended. For while Horton sat there, so faithful, so kind, 3 hunters came sneaking up softly behind. He heard the men's footsteps. He turned with a start. 3 rifles were aiming right straight at his heart. Did he run? He did not. Horton stayed on that nest. He held his head high and he threw out his chest and he looked at the hunters as much as to say, Shoot if you must, but I won't run away. I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. An elephant's faithful 100%. But the men didn't shoot. Much to Horton's surprise, they dropped their 3 guns and they stared with wide eyes. Look, they all shouted. Can such a thing be? An elephant sitting on top of a tree. It's strange, it's amazing, it's wonderful, new. Don't shoot him, we'll catch him. That's just what we'll do. Let's take him alive. Why, he's terribly funny. We'll sell him back home to a circus for money. And the first thing he knew, they had built a big wagon with ropes on the front for the pullers to drag on. They dug up his tree and they put it inside, with Horton so sad that he practically cried. We're off, the men shouted, and off they all went, with Horton unhappy, 100%. Up out of the jungle, up into the sky, up over the mountains 10,000 feet high, and down the mountains, and down to the sea went the cart with the elephant, egg, nest, and tree. Then out of the wagon and onto a ship. Out over the ocean, and ooh, what a trip! Rolling and tossing and splashed with the spray. And Horton said day after day after day, I meant what I said, and I said what I meant, but oh, am I seasick, 100%. After bobbing around for 2 weeks like a cork, they landed at last in the town of New York. All ashore, the men shouted, and down with a lurch went Horton the elephant, still on his perch, tied onto a board that could just scarcely hold him. Bump! Horton landed, and then the men sold him. Sold to a circus. Then week after week, they showed him to people at 10 cents a peek. They took him to Boston, to Kalamazoo, Chicago, Weehawken, and Washington too. To Dayton, Ohio, St. Paul, Minnesota, to Wichita, Kansas, to Drake, North Dakota, and everywhere thousands of folks flocked to see and laugh at the elephant up in a tree. Poor Horton grew sadder the farther he went, but he said as he sat in the hot, noisy tent, I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. An elephant's faithful, 100%. Then, one day, the circus show happened to reach a town way down south, not so far from Palm Beach. And dawdling along way up high in the sky, who, of all people, should chance to fly by but that old good-for-nothing bird, Runaway Maisie, still on vacation and still just as lazy. And spying the flags and the tents just below, she sang out,
What fun! Why, I'll go to the show.
And she swooped from the clouds through an open tent door.
Good gracious,
gasped Maisie.
I've seen you before.
Poor Horton looked up with his face white as chalk. He started to speak, but before he could talk, there rang out the noisiest ear-splitting squeaks from the egg that he'd sat on for 51 weeks. A thumping, a bumping, a wild, alive scratching. My egg! Shouted Horton. My egg! Why, it's hatching!
But it's mine!
Screamed the bird when she heard the egg crack. The work was all done. Now she wanted it back.
It's my egg!
She sputtered.
You stole it from me! Get off of my nest and get out of my tree!
Poor Horton backed down with a sad, heavy heart. But at that very instant, the egg burst apart. And out of the pieces of red and white shell from the egg that he'd sat on so long and so well, Horton the elephant saw something whiz. It had ears and a tail and a trunk, just like his. And the people came shouting, What's all this about? They looked and they stared with their eyes popping out. Then they cheered and they cheered and they cheered more and more. They'd never seen anything like it before. My goodness, my gracious, they shouted. My word! It's something brand new! It's an elephant bird! And it should be like that. Because Horton was faithful. He sat and he sat. He meant what he said and he said what he meant. And they sent him home, happy, 100%.